The restaurant hummed with the low, tired rhythm of a Tuesday night, forks clinking, muted laughter rising and falling like a distant tide, and Elena barely noticed any of it as she wiped down table 17 for the third time, her mind replaying the look on Cassandra Blackwood's face earlier that evening, the kind of look that had made grown executives stutter and seasoned lawyers lose their words. Because Cassandra Blackwood was not just any billionaire's daughter, she was the billionaire's daughter, raised in penthouses and private jets, educated in rooms where decisions shifted markets, and infamous for breaking people without ever raising her voice, and yet here she was now, seated alone in the corner booth of a modest waterfront restaurant, her designer coat draped carelessly beside her like it meant nothing, her sharp eyes scanning the room as if daring someone to disappoint her, which almost everyone eventually did. And Elena knew the stories, everyone did, about the nannies who quit in tears, the tutors who lasted weeks, the fiancés who vanished without explanation, about how no one could handle Cassandra, not because she screamed or insulted or threw tantrums, but because she saw through people, stripped them down to their insecurities with a single sentence, and left them exposed. And when Elena first approached the table earlier with her practiced smile and polite greeting, she'd expected the usual dismissal, maybe a cold nod, maybe nothing at all, but instead, Cassandra had looked up and said, "You're exhausted," not as an insult, not even as a question, just a fact, and something about that had startled Elena more than rudeness ever could, because she was exhausted, bone-deep tired from double shifts and overdue bills and a life that had narrowed into survival mode, and she'd replied without thinking, "Yes, but I'm still happy to help you," and for the briefest moment, Cassandra's expression had flickered, like a crack in marble, before smoothing over again. And now hours later Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in that booth, that some invisible line had been crossed, because Cassandra hadn't sent her food back, hadn't complained, hadn't even looked bored. She'd eaten slowly, thoughtfully, watching Elena move around the room like she was studying a puzzle she hadn't yet solved, and when Elena finally brought the check, Cassandra hadn't glanced at the total, just slid a black card across the table and said, "Sit." And when Elena hesitated, Cassandra added quietly, "I don't repeat myself," and something in Elena, the same something that had kept her standing through years of disappointment, told her to listen, so she sat, heart pounding, aware of how wrong it looked, a waitress sitting across from one of the most powerful young women in the world, and Cassandra leaned back, folded her hands, and said, "Everyone lies to me, Elena," using her name even though Elena hadn't introduced herself. "They want something. Money. Status. Approval. You didn't," and Elena swallowed and replied honestly, "I wanted you to enjoy your meal," and Cassandra laughed, a real laugh, sudden and unguarded, startling enough that a couple at a nearby table glanced over, and that was when Elena understood that whatever mask Cassandra wore for the world, it was heavy, and it was lonely, and without fully realizing how, Elena had become the first person in a very long time who hadn't tried to take something from her. And the night ended not with drama or confrontation but with an odd quietness, Cassandra leaving a tip that could have covered Elena's rent for months, and a business card slipped beneath the plate with nothing but a name and a number on it, and as Elena stood there after closing, holding that card between her fingers, she felt the strange pull of fate tightening, because she didn't know yet that this moment would be talked about in boardrooms and tabloids one day, that people would ask how it all began, how the untouchable Cassandra Blackwood was finally reached, and the answer would be simple and unbelievable. Cassandra didn't call the next day, or the day after, and Elena told herself she hadn't expected her to, that billionaires' daughters didn't circle back to waitresses no matter how unusual the encounter, yet on the fourth morning, as Elena was lacing her worn shoes before another double shift, her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number and a message that read simply, "Breakfast. 9 a.m. Blackwood Tower," and there was no greeting, no explanation, just an address known worldwide and a certainty that refusal wasn't an option, and Elena arrived 15 minutes early, hands trembling as she passed through layers of security that treated her kindly but thoroughly, until she was ushered into a sunlit dining room high above the city where Cassandra sat barefoot at a long glass table, hair loose, eyes tired in a way no headline ever captured, and she gestured to the chair across from her and said, "You came," and Elena answered, "You asked," and Cassandra studied her for a long moment before saying, "Everyone I've ever trusted wanted to own me, and Elena didn't rush to respond, didn't deny it or soften it, she simply said, "That sounds lonely," and something in Cassandra broke then, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like ice melting after years of winter, and she spoke of her father, Victor Blackwood, a man who built an empire from nothing and expected his daughter to be sharper, colder, untouchable, of a childhood measured in performance and outcomes, of love that always came with conditions, and Elena listened, not as an employee or a fan or a subordinate, but as a human being who knew what it meant to survive expectations that weren't chosen, and days turned into weeks where Cassandra insisted Elena accompany her, first as an assistant in name only, then as a constant presence, someone who didn't flinch when Cassandra tested her with cutting remarks or impossible schedules or sudden silences, someone who didn't try to fix her but also didn't fear her, and the impossible happened slowly, invisibly, until one afternoon during a hostile board meeting where executives froze under Cassandra's glare, Elena leaned over and whispered, "You don't need to win every room to be safe," and Cassandra paused, just long enough for the room to breathe. And later the headlines called it a strategic shift, but Cassandra knew it was trust, and when Victor Blackwood finally confronted Elena, asking coldly what she wanted from his daughter, Elena met his gaze and said, "Nothing," and for the first time in decades, the billionaire didn't know how to respond, because power couldn't buy that answer, and Cassandra chose then, not to rebel or run, but to redefine herself, announcing a foundation focused on worker dignity, on unseen people like waitresses and cleaners and assistants. And the world was stunned, analysts baffled, critics scrambling, and when asked who inspired the change, Cassandra didn't name a mentor or a book, she said, "Someone who treated me like I mattered before knowing who I was," and Elena remained by her side, not elevated by wealth but grounded by purpose, proving that strength doesn't always roar, sometimes it listens, sometimes it stays, sometimes it tells the most powerful woman in the room the truth when no one else dares. And that was the impossible thing no one could handle before her, because Cassandra Blackwood didn't need to be conquered or controlled, she needed to be seen.